checkers or help robotics do a few vision tasks. And then came this whole winter, it's called AI winter, where it was absolutely decided that AI is not going to work because it's available and more accessible. And since the 1990s, I think late 97, the first AI game actually beats Garry Kasparov at chess. And that starts the resurgence of AI and I think and what you call machine learning. Traditional machine learning where you do tasks like classification, reading comprehension, summarization is born, right? It's born, but you still have to do a lot of understanding of features, which is called feature engineering. And that goes well in the enterprise, but 2013 onwards, there's this new field of artificial intelligence which revamps machine learning and says, okay, now deep learning, let me throw all the data at a deep learning model and you don't have to do feature engineering. I mean, it's a big promise, right? Because now you don't have to have data scientists sit and create features for you, but you have the machine algorithms learn what's important to recognize if it's a cat or a dog. And so that's a big leap, right? And that's where we are going at. And then, of course, the enterprises realize that not every application or task is going to have that huge amounts of data. And now is the world of transfer learning, right? So can you build huge models right up front and then use a little bit of domain data, a little bit to understand whether not a cat or a dog, but maybe whether it's, you know, a cancer patient or not. So build once on large data, little bit of domain data to, you know, tune your models. So let's say rule-based systems, hugely tuned, machine learning, deep learning, transfer learning. That's kind of the spectrum of AI that I've seen. And then on applications, the roadmap has been AI applications are everywhere, right? Consumer-centric applications. You wake up in the morning talking to Alexa, you sleep at night getting Netflix recommendations. There's consumer-centric apps. There's enterprise AI, there's mission-critical in defense and healthcare. But all these applications, maybe more so in defense and mission critical, really asking you the question of accountability, right? Can you explain, can AI models explain what they are saying, why they took a certain decision? And I think that's where I see the roadmap of AI applications changing that, yes, you have the tools to do deep neural networks, you have the tools to do transfer learning, but can you also build in accountability and transparency into your AI models? It says, I'm saying something because of this and that. And I think that's how I see the roadmap.
Manish, what kind of breakthroughs do you see coming in the next few years?
Sure. Just as a very introduction, I'm founding partner of Pi Ventures. We are a small fund. We specifically focus on AI. So this is a subject we have been sort of studying for the last 2.5 years. And a few thoughts on what we are finding interesting and what is making a difference. So what we say is that it's important for an application or a use of an application, the use of AI in an application to bring the 10x factor. So what I mean by that is today you are solving that problem in a certain way. And if I have an AI-backed algorithm, can it solve 10x better? And we tend to see that most in what we call as AI-first companies, where the whole essence of that startup is because they have an AI algorithm to begin with. A couple of examples here, just to nail the concept down, is I'll probably talk about two companies. One is called SigTuple, which has taken, they've created a product which can scan your blood digitally, and then using an AI algorithm can give you the entire blood report. Now that is significant because in today's conventional method of testing, you have to take the blood where the pathologist is. So there's a lot of logistics involved, the cost of reagents involved, so it's all that is not required in this, right? So it's clearly a 10x factor suddenly you have introduced by using AI. Similarly, we have another company called Niramay, which is into breast cancer screening. And as you know, breast cancer takes away a lot of lives across the world. And one of the primary reasons is that breast cancer gets detected late because the main modality is mammogram, which actually does not work very well under 45 years of age for women. So now come AI, and what they've done is they've taken the thermal picture of the area, and using AI they are able to figure out cell activity very, very early on. And suddenly you are able to recognize that at the very onset of cancer. So I think building on the same theme, I feel that applications which can be improved, they can jump and orbit using AI across the sectors. We are looking at seeing examples of something like this across the sectors is something that we believe we'll see more and more.
So just building on them, Ravi, I wanted to ask you that he said 10x and she said deep learning, but they're comparing it to what it was. Now, a lot of people say, do you ever think that thinking machines, human level AI is a real possibility? Because we guys are 100x of what their machines were, or 500x, I don't know. So do you think that this is a real possibility, and when might this happen?
So it depends on how you are measuring the speed up, right? So in some cases you can say machines are actually 10x for humans, but if you're talking about general intelligence, right?
Yes.
How versatile humans are, right? I would say that AI is not even at the level of a 3-year-old yet, right? So we have a long way to go before we get to truly quote-unquote thinking machines, as you would call another human being, right? Regardless of whether he's able to play chess or able to pick out cats from a view. So the technology is not there yet, right? So all these success stories that you see, right, have very, very carefully, conscribed areas in which they are working in, right? So if it is Alexa, you mentioned Alexa as an example, right? Alexa is great because people want Alexa to work, right? So if I really want to run a challenge on Alexa to make it misrecognize stuff, right? In fact, a funny story happened. So I have a yoga class that happens in my house, and whenever the yoga master starts counting down or something like that, Alexa immediately pipes up and says, sorry, I don't recognize that. Okay? He's not talking to Alexa, he's just telling us to bend our knees or something like that, right? So when these things work because we want them to work, right? So in cases where you really want to break an AI system, it's easy to do it even in some of these big success stories that we see here, right? So just because we actually pick and choose the right areas in which we are using AI, and we are seeing all these success stories. If I want to have a general AI intelligence, we are far away from understanding, right? And having said that, and I don't want to say that it's not possible for us to reach there, because my job is to help students dream, right? So I don't want to shut down their dreams by saying, hey, AI is not possible, right? Maybe it's not possible in my lifetime, but I think we are making progress, and certainly down the line, we are going to have true thinking machines, and we are slowly making progress, right? Deep learning is helping, and it's also confusing things, right? Because it's making us move away from some of the true AI questions, because it's the jazz around deep learning that makes us think that AI is succeeding, right? So I really like Ali Rahmi's analogy of how AI is alchemy, and alchemy is not bad. Alchemy was good, because alchemy helped us make significant advances in metallurgy, right? Alchemy helped us push chemical processes in a big way, right? At that point of time, there's something like that was needed. But then later on, there had to be another at least a century and a half of development in sciences when we could understand what alchemy was doing, right? So deep learning is just getting out of the alchemy stage now, right? So we still have a long way to go.
So it's just a matter of time, but you think we can get there?
Yes.
You think? Amarjot, what about you? Do you think we're close to human level AI?
So I agree with most of the stuff Professor Ravi said. I just want to extend a bit on that. So I think when we think about humans, we have the capacity to learn things one after the other and evolve and build on those concepts which we have learned as humans. So the AI systems which we have right now can only do very specific, narrow things. And if you, as Gargi mentioned about transfer learning, you train it on a certain system and then you adapt it to a different application, that's all it can do. But we as humans have the ability to continuously evolve and learn. So I think one thing which is really missing from our current AI systems is their ability to learn continuously and retain the information which they have learned a while ago. And I think that is the primary thing which is missing in the current AI systems. And if we are able to achieve that, we will be one step closer to achieving artificial general intelligence. And even after that, we have the capacity to make decisions which are kind of interpretable. We can say, well, we are doing this thing because of this. Most of the AI systems which we use lack interpretability. So they make certain decisions, but we don't really understand why they make those decisions, which is scary because we are starting to use them from autonomous driving vehicles, we use them for healthcare, we use them for financial transactions. And if we don't really understand why they are making certain decisions, the outcome can be catastrophic. So I think.
No, so is there a missing piece in this puzzle, or is it just a matter of time? You know, Ravi says it's a matter of time, right? I mean, even Delhi is walking distance if you have enough time, right? So we'll get to there. Is that what the constraint is, or there is a piece missing here?
So the learning part where the system needs to evolve one after the other as it sees the task, that is a matter of time. About the interpretability, there has been some work in solving that. And I'm hopeful that eventually we will reach to a solution using our current models or maybe some new models, but I think eventually we will get there.
I think, yeah.
So just to go back to the point about just a matter of time. So getting to Delhi from here is just a matter of time, but I know the path. Right?
Okay.
But in AI, getting to true intelligence in AI, I still say it's just a matter of time, but I don't know what the path is.
No, but we know what human level intelligence is. So the destination is known. Are you saying we don't know the destination?
We think we know, but it's not. It's not.
So just elaborate on that. What do you
Sure,
mean?
Okay, fine. So there are multiple levels at which you're going to define human intelligence, right? So there is a psychological level, and then there is a neurological level. Right? So at the neuroscience level, we really don't understand how humans arrive at decisions, right? Okay. So there are a lot of theories in psychology which try to explain how human beings think, logic and reasoning and biases. A lot of studies have been done in that space, right? So we have some kind of an understanding, at least at that behavioral level, of how human intelligence works, right? But at the actual mechanistic level, how the neurons come together and fire in your brain so as to cause that behavioral effect that you see, right? That understanding is still missing. We are making progress, but we are even much more in infancy there than we are in AI. So that's.
I think if I can, I don't think it's one single point, right? It's not Delhi. It's like a state. It's a continuum. So even that human intelligence, the true human intelligence, I don't think it's a matter of time. It's a matter of time in the sense that we are expecting that we have broken through some hurdles and we will break through some more hurdles, and then it becomes a matter of time, but it's not a path which is sorted. But in that continuum, some basic conversational skills which are slightly more open than what Alexa does today, that may be within the short.
Did you want to add to that, Gargi?
So I think I just wanted to echo everything that we still don't know how humans learn. But the gap or the missing piece that I see could be, if I have to algorithmically define it, is a way to encode domain knowledge. And I think till we find that suitable encoding that can be done without a manual labeling effort, I think we are going to be not at that level. So because humans, you throw them here or you throw them at wartime, they will be able to pick up the domain knowledge instantly, right? I think we need to teach our algorithms. So encoding domain knowledge is one gap that I see.
Okay. Let me shift gears here, and this is a question I want Shivna to answer, but after we hear Ravi and others, right? So what are the risks or threats that are associated with AI that we should be genuinely concerned about? I mean, I saw Elon Musk, maybe it must be an old statement, but he said it's like AI is summoning the demons and more dangerous than nuclear weapons or something. Are you in that camp, that this is a really dangerous? No way. So what are the threats that we should be concerned about besides Facebook?
Manish is saving the best for last.
Okay. So I actually wrote this in an article some time back. The biggest threat of AI is people rushing to the market with AI before it's ready. right? So it's not AI itself, it's people trying to get the first mover advantage and trying to push things out and using a technology that's not been tested and ready into more critical use cases, right? As a technology itself, right? I don't know what is dangerous or not about a technology. Nuclear technology is dangerous, right? So as a technology, AI has significant potential to do good and harm.
No, that's the old argument that a knife can be used for murder and
Sure.
a knife can be used for surgery. But you understand what a knife is, you understand. I think the worry of people is we don't understand what AI is.
Exactly.
And
I completely agree with you on. That's why I said people rushing to use AI before it is ready, right? I think that is the biggest threat of AI. Without understanding whether you are handling
what
a
do you
knife,
mean ready?
without understanding whether you are handling a knife or nitroglycerin, right? So,
Do you have any thoughts on the threat or the concerns that people have? Are they dancing with ghosts in your mind?
So I agree with Professor Ravi's comments. So an example of this is that we are trying to make driverless cars. So we know so algorithms know how to recognize the road. They know how to follow traffic signs, which are the easy bits. But what if there is a small kid which jumps onto the road? What do? Do you actually hit the person, the child, or do you actually drive off the road? And those are a lot of the issues which we don't have the answers to yet. And those are the concerns. Also, even recognizing known objects can be critical. As I said, we don't really understand the decisions which these models make. There's no interpretability over there. So they can actually make false decisions, and we can just take them on their face value because they don't actually give you any uncertainty. They just say, this is a car or not, take it or not, it's up to you. So I think those are one challenges. And also, most of the stuff which I do is focused on making defense-based applications. And have seen China's effort on making AI credit scoring system and targeting individuals who they don't agree with. So I think those are really serious issues which will come up in the future, especially weaponizing, making weapons which are supported by AI. And since we don't really understand how they work, that could be a very serious concern.
I mean,
Let Gargi go first, and then
Yeah.
you can answer everybody.
Yeah, so of course interpretability is a big thing. I think AI models also carry the bias in the data. And I want to maybe give a small example. Let's say I'm in my 20s and I was looking for professional guidance, right? And I wanted to use an AI system that could predict what a 20-year-old Indian girl could take up as a profession. And where would I go? I would probably go to books or movies. So we've done this study on our favorite Bollywood movies that says, if I were to build a professional career predictor from Bollywood movies, the career of choice that I could have is very, very limited, and definitely not that in the sciences. So I would be limited to, being a teacher, a painter, a nurse, right? So, and that's because that's what the movies are showing. So the models are going to inherit the bias in the data. And that's a real no-no for AI. So you need debiasing,
But the data is the world.
The data is humans'
It's today's
representation.
world full of biases, right?
Which is, so they inherit the human biases, right? The movies and the books represent our biases through the years. And that's how, cultural biases will creep into your models. And if you're using them for decision making, that's not a good point.
So what do you think?
Manish, I have a fundamental problem with the framing of the question. We are almost talking as if there is a race between AI as an entity and human beings. I think the problem of risk threat, one of the biggest problem I feel is there is extreme fascination or enamorment about the fact that AI is going to replace human beings. We at Facebook, and I personally also feel, and I don't think it's a race, and one of the ways to let AI evolve is to let it grow over time. And to take Ravi's analogy of saying it's a 3-year-old, I think we are trying to put too much pressure on this 3-year-old to perform. And we have to let this 3-year-old kind of understand, recognize challenges such as biases in data, subjectivity in the way we create the features within an AI model, make sure those biases don't creep in, make sure the social biases don't creep in. But the bigger fundamental issue is we need to demystify it a little bit. And just from a Facebook position, we feel that we are just about working in the weak AI space right now. We are not even anywhere close to what you quoted, what Musk has said or what Stephen Hawking had said about how humans will be destroyed by AI machines and AI robots. The fact is, we don't even have a fundamental understanding of how the neural networks work, how the synapses are structured, how those decision makings happen. So to kind of run ahead of its time, I think we're going to end up killing the whole AI space. And I know you're itching to come to the regulation part. I will come to that in a second. But if AI is at such a premature, such a extremely young stage, I think to kind of impose, just because we are looking at the fascinating aspects of the application, is we're going to hurt it more. That's my problem, because the applications are very basic. So Alexa, all it is doing is recognizing voice. It is not doing any brain-led calculations. So for example, to mislead Alexa is very easy. You try talking to Alexa in a different accent than what Alexa has been trained in your house for the last 15 days, it will not understand what it's saying, or you're saying. So, I mean, and people think Alexa is the coolest AI invention, consumer invention. So application-wise, you can always have very fascinating inventions around it. Having said that, if at this stage, if you don't let this weak AI help you understand what strong AI could end up doing, you will kill it through regulation. And we feel that at this stage, the way AI technology is structured, the way the learnings are coming in, more than regulation, what you need is collaboration. And you need partnerships. You need much more joint venture work between academia, private sector, companies. And it is already happening. Just so that everybody knows, partnership on AI is like a global effort where all these companies, at least some of them represented here, and many academic institutions across the world have come together across 13 countries and 4 continents, where all research being done by us, at least Facebook, and also some of the other majors, are made public. All publications are public. We release data sets so that what we learn, we allow others to learn, and vice versa. Because at the end of the day, the way AI will evolve will not be some single person's monopoly.
But we have digital monopolies. Yes. I mean, Facebook and Google don't have clients, they have hostages, right?
I'm glad you raised that. So, very important.
So,
it's very
why are you saying that my business will be a monopoly, but downstream will be open?
It's natural, it's very fashionable to understand that, because those are built on a different technology. AI is what is allowing us to get better at our own restricted fields. But the core AI learning has to be shared to understand the technologies better. So what does Facebook use AI for? Very simple. Everybody will ask that question. Or you're going to create another monopolistic product. No. We are actually using AI to improve where we are not able to perform. So whether it is in building better classifiers or helping people understand when they are getting tagged, etc. So these are issues which humanly today we cannot end up reviewing the millions of billions of pieces of content that we see. AI can help us do that. AI can actually enhance human performance. It can create more exciting opportunities. And hence, that also goes back to the other debate that people say, oh, it's going to destroy human jobs. We do not think so. We think human productivity will be
Let me come
more.
to the jobs question. Ravi, are you buying what he says, that AI is more open architecture by definition? It's much more collaborative than the traditional world. It has to be there. There would be a birth defect if AI was a closed system and a monopoly.
Sitting in academia, unless the industry is open, right? So we'll be left far behind in the race, because AI requires significant volumes of data to, show quantum improvements in, right? And I should agree with what Srinath said, that a lot of companies are opening up some of the code, with the exception of a few who shall not be named. A lot of companies are opening up code. Facebook AI Research has certainly released a lot. Google Brain has released significant amounts of code as well, and so does Microsoft. In fact, Microsoft is having a significant push towards open sourcing a lot of their AI. So I think the big companies are understanding the importance of having a vibrant AI ecosystem, and they're certainly helping do that, right? And I do agree that without that, you wouldn't have growth in AI. Unless everybody works for one of these big corporates, it's not going to happen, right? And that's
if I may just add, Manish, I'm glad you raised that, whether academia thinks or, because that is the only way AI stakeholders will be responsible. Right. Co-ownership will make it responsible. So hence, the reason why regulation is not bad per se, but what I'm saying is if you can drive responsibility at the core of it, regulation can follow. Yes, at some point in time, it will come, but at this point in time, we need responsible behavior, even where bad applications are there, where there are some breaches which will threaten human existence. That needs to be addressed directly through responsible behavior.
But is there a role for government in these concerns about AI, or no? We should, I mean, driving license were issued 50 years after cars were invented, so people got 50 years to drive the way they wanted, and that technically led to some innovation. I don't think AI will get 50 years, but is there a role for government, or we should let the Cambrian explosion of innovation, let a million of statistically independent, genetically diverse types happen?
I think that the technology itself should not be regulated, and I think that all of us on the panel are in agreement with that. But there are certain domains where, even though they appear to be strictly regulated now, they have not thought about questions of what AI would enable, for example, in driving, right? Or what AI would enable even in terms of surveillance and things like that. Right? There are a few technology areas, even though there is regulation, they have not explicitly addressed what can AI bring to the table. In such areas, I think we need to be a little bit more careful, but I certainly do not subscribe to the government regulating
So you think,
AI
like
as a
defense,
technology.
we should be careful, but do you have any other thoughts on regulation?
Yeah, so I think that technology on its own, there shouldn't be any regulations on that. I think that's fundamental for the innovation and growth of the companies. I totally agree with that. And I also agree with that there are some certain applications where the outcome can actually produce fatalities. For example, the driverless cars, or for example, we were approached to develop a system to predict people who are most likely to steal a car. And the databases which they gave us were only people who were, of a certain ethnic group and all that. And obviously the model which you're going to construct will be something, like that. So I think there are certain applications where we need to be a bit careful, but I think regulation should be also very careful as well, because over-regulation is going to kill the space. And so I think they need to go hand in hand, but very
Manish,
carefully.
you have thoughts?
I think it's, in my view, regulating technology is a bad idea, because whatever the technology will produce will probably land in a space which is regulated already. So if I'm doing, let's say in healthcare, I'm coming up with a new way to do breast cancer, I just can't go to the hospital and start testing patients. I have to jump a few hoops to get there, and so on and so forth. Having said that, there are certain areas which are getting possible which were not possible before. For example, self-driving cars. So I think there, again, providing some framework, regulatory framework on the application, the outcome of it, rather than putting on the technology, would be a better approach, in my opinion.
So how do we address concerns without, so bad regulation, good regulation, how do you address, we don't live in an economy, we live in a society, right? And people do dance with ghosts, people do worry about the future is unknowable. So how do we address concerns without stifling innovation?
So one of the first things, just to continue with one thought on role of government, and I'll come to concerns, is one of the key roles of the government is to identify the problems that AI can solve. And I think Niti's report on AI for India is a very good report, which at least tells you which are the sectors where AI applications will help solve the problem. Now, having identified those problems, and let's say some Manish's investee companies come up with a solution, then you have to see the potential downside of the risk. Health data or misuse of it, that's different. There's a redressal for that already. So idea is, unless you identify the problem which you want to solve, we're already jumping to concerns that those problems will eventually throw up. So my point is, let's not put the cart before the horse. Let's understand what is it that AI can solve in the Indian context. And I think the government's approach on identifying social sectors has been a very prudent one, because I think whatever the state of AI learning is in the industry and academia, they can solve those fundamental problems. So for example, monitoring of health data and then solving for certain predictive illnesses is a possibility. Education, again, a huge thing, using NLP and understanding local language problems, and in some ways having a universal approach to curriculum development. Now, if you say, oh, if we do this, the concern could be that children could be exposed to XYZ, but that is not what AI is trying to solve. AI is trying to solve identified problems with identified paths to those solutions. I think there's a bigger opportunity to solve the problem than just worry about the concern right now, and those concerns There are ways and avenues. We are talking about data protection law. There are ways to control those aspects. Like you said, the sectors are regulated themselves as well.
Okay, last question before.
So all of us are agreeing with each other. Just for a variety, I'm just going to disagree. Not that I believe in what I'm saying, just to give a counterpoint, right? So one argument for regulating technology itself, if the technology is there, somebody is going to use it. Like editing, like the CRISPR techniques for editing and making designer babies, right? So maybe we should worry about some such technology as well, So maybe it shouldn't fund things that could have potentially a very, very significant drastic downside to it. I mean, the human nature being what it is, once the technology is there, people might find ways of,
No, but I'm not sure I agree with that, because I think
even I don't agree with that.
No,
I just want
I'm not sure I agree with the lack of regulation. I think there are 4 cases for regulation: externalities, information asymmetry, consumer protection, and market failure. You should have regulation when one of those 4 situations, and there are many potential situations with AI which fit that criteria. So I'm not really on his boat now. But
2 of the 4 that you said already have avenues for it. Consumer protection. Data protection would be one.
Externalities?
Externalities, so the country has to think about it.
Right.
So vis-a-vis China, you need to think about it. But the country has all right to do that from an externality
Information asymmetry?
Sure, but the fact is there are avenues to do it. To curb on AI as a technology is what is being debated here. Sure. It is not about whether you can address consumer protection with existing or non-existent laws. You can. That's what I'm trying to do.
Okay. So just before we open it up to the crowd, do you think that there'll be massive job disruption, economic disruption, or are these concerns overhyped? If all of you could quickly give your take. Do you think that this whole people's worrying about jobs and economic destruction of AI, is this hyped or is this real?
So technology revolution is not new. It has been happening over decades. But there is something unique about this technology revolution. And that is that usually when a technology revolution happens, jobs are displaced from one field, go to another field, and the people who lose their jobs go to the other area. But the thing is, like, the AI systems which we are developing have the capacity to also do the jobs which we are displacing. So the short answer is, I don't know. We'll just have to see how much of those jobs they can actually take over. So
Ravi?
Yeah, so again, I kind of agree with what Amarjot said. So technology disruption and change in the mix of job profiles has always happened repeatedly, right? And at this point of time,
Is it bigger? Is it faster? Is it scarier this time?
I don't know about scarier.
Okay.
So we have not lived through the past job disruptions. I don't know, when the machine steam engine came in, did people have the vision to see what would be the new kind of jobs that would be created back then? I'm not sure. Right, so we are in a similar situation now, right? So once the disruption sets in, we don't know what kind of jobs will be created, but I believe in human ingenuity, so we will find.
Manish?
Yeah, I think in the near term, I think that there is a great scope for human plus AI. And we are actually seeing that in some of the companies. The BPO model is changing. It's becoming human plus AI to solve some real problems. So I actually feel that the jobs may increase in the near term. And obviously...
But our grandchildren are screwed, is it? Sorry? Our grandkids are screwed, is it?
So long term what will happen is still to be seen. But one thing is for sure, that the skill set needs to change. You cannot be just doing what you were doing before. So that displacement will happen.
I think same. Human plus AI is where I see it going. Jobs will change. I think repetitive menial tasks may be done by AI, robotics and the kind. And we do the more interesting thing. I think it's a win-win for us. Yeah, more involved reasoning kind of jobs.
So Manish, you're an economic historian. I know you like to quote history. So when automobiles got invented, obviously somebody who made the horse cart went out of job. The horse rider went out of the job. Horses went out of the job. But it didn't deter from GDP to grow. So technology is never GDP restrictive. That's the way I look at it. And once the pie grows, there will be more jobs. Yes, it will have some basic fundamental requirements, such as reskilling. It's like saying fintech is going to shut down banks. It will not. Fintech is a part of technology, which has probably opened up much more innovation in companies. And I think as long as the core principle, at least at Facebook, we believe that AI will help humans do more and better and add more productive opportunities.
Do we have questions? People have them. If they don't have, we're happy to carry on. But And just questions, please. You know, comments if you want. Give your name to Rudra. He'll call you on the panel next year.
Scientist from British Telecom, and I work in the same thing. I have taken multiple guest lectures on AI and this. But the major questions which comes from most of the people are, AI is for good. Even Microsoft logo say AI for good. But then there are negative things as well with AI, like terrorists are using it, governments, defense is using it. How do we control it? That is, do you have any thoughts on that negative implications? Or is it left on governments or the people who are doing that AI?
So asking, should people self-regulate, is it?
Yes.
I think that's for you.
So if I may give you an anecdotal example. So I was a journalist. I covered 26/11 at the Taj when the terrorists attacked. So you could be on either side of history to say live television reporting helped you to know more, or live television helped terrorists to orchestrate the attacks better. So industry ended up self-regulating itself. So I think responsible behavior and self-regulation is going to go far ahead than the government clamping down, saying shut down live television and when terrorist attacks happen.
Yes, sir. You in the back of the mic, then gentleman here. Go ahead.
Hello. Hi. I'm Rahul, and my question is, most of the time panel as well as media discuss about like, can AI beat humans or not? But if we think about when humans were surpassing all the animals, let's say they were never as strong as elephant, they were never as strong, they were never as fast as a tiger. So the question is very simple, that AI really need to mimic humans, or it can surpass even without touching humans or humans' quality. What I mean to say, like, is it really a question that AI can surpass humans, or AI can take a very different route, because it's very much connected to the network where it never mimic humans, but it's always, it can become more powerful than humans.
Does anyone don't take it?
Yeah, so for narrow applications, I would say AI has surpassed humans, right? So we can do a lot of, AI systems can do a lot of things much better than us. But the question is that if you want to make a unified system which can do a lot of things together, then we need to take some sort of inputs from human intelligence. But I don't think so that we really need to mimic humans as such to design efficient systems.
I'd like to add to that a little bit, right? You have heard of some of the big success stories like AlphaGo, right? So one of the things that was pretty unique about AlphaGo is that the way it played Go was very dissimilar to how humans play Go. In fact, some of the moves it used were specifically discouraged to beginners. You know, when they're trying to learn to play Go, you're told not to make those moves, but AlphaGo found a way to win by making those moves, right? So in some sense, you know, given enough degrees of freedom, the AI systems are going to evolve in slightly different ways than humans. But as a starting point, you know, for trying to structure solutions, it's at least good to know what are the problems that humans solve in order to build general intelligence. Maybe you don't end up solving it the same way they do, but there are certain steps along the way that humans you know, achieve for solving general intelligence. It's good to know that. So
Did you want to add something, Gargi?
Yeah, I think a different example, right? Doctors and AI, right? Is AI going to replace doctors? Not in the next 1,000 years, right? But what it can really help doctors do is sieve through, let's say, millions of diagnosis reports and place forward, 10 possible cases where the doctor then has a call that which is the case that I can relate to. So I think assistance is what I would say AI is going to help in going forward, and not really replacement or mimicking.
Yes, sir. Gentleman who has the mic, and then in front after that.
Thank you. My name is Umidyar Network. I work with Tata Sons in the Office of the Group Economist. I want to take Manish's question about jobs and just refine it a bit and throw it back again, right? So let's make this India specific. Given what we know about our workforce, given that we know that the general level of skill or education in our workforce is quite low, 77% are earning less than 10,000 a month, 85% are in the informal sector. So before we start talking about how, introduction of AI or other technologies will require reskilling, where do we place this sort of bottom 2/3 of our workforce in a world of employment where AI is a significant part?
Go ahead.
Actually, Manish is the best person to answer this question because he has written extensively on this. And if I may steal a thing from his lexicon about India has a wage problem, does not have a job problem. So The question you're asking is how to fix the wage issue. And I think that is a more fundamental core economic problem. That's not an AI-related problem. I stand on the side of the debate where I think AI can help unleash a massive set of opportunities where AI will never exist in isolation. It will need a lot of support services kind of a industry. So diagnostics could be one of them, which is where the value accretion can happen. But I would let Manish do the analysis. I do agree with him that it's a more fundamental economic / social problem.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll just spend a second. India has a productivity problem. Half our labor force produces 13% of our GDP, right? Now, the question is, why? It was not God's will that it should take 72 years for 1.2 billion Indians to cross the GDP of 66 million Britishers, right? We're crossing England's GDP this year. So the question is, does AI help productivity as Gargi believes, or do people believe that it'll kill us because it's so much more productive than us? I think the future is unknowable and we can't predict it. But as we are so far from the productivity frontier in India that I think we don't have to worry about this at this stage.
Can I give you one example which recently happened in one of our companies? So in our breast cancer company, what happens is the detection of breast cancer has become very automated with this product that they have. And they ran camps. They do run camps in different places. And they need people to just sort of do the basic thing, right? Prepare the woman, take a picture, press some buttons, etc. So they recently did with a big cab company, and a lot of wives of the drivers were actually trained for a week, and they became the operators for those camps. And that is a kind of reskilling with technology. If it can help you lower the bar of what you need to learn and still be useful, I'm hopeful that some of those opportunities will become more scalable and available.
Yes, sir, you had a question, sir.
Rakesh Sood, I wanted to bring an analogy because let's say if you look at lethal autonomous weapon systems today, you start with human in the loop. Let's say today's Predator drones with firing Hellfire missiles. Then you have a system where it is human on the loop in the sense that the decision is taken automatically, but if the human being wants, can intervene. And the final stage, which has also emerged with swarms and things like that, is human out of the loop, because the decision-making times are such that the human beings cannot react efficiently. So does this kind of an analogy fit somewhere in terms of regulation of technology as you were talking about?
Yeah, so the analogy is good, but the industry was so different. AI will not necessarily follow that path is what we understand. We are not even at a stage where we are disconnecting the humans and AI. All we are saying is AI is being a complementary effort. It's not about to replace human beings. One of the data points that I looked at, we tag about 700 million images every day. It cannot be done humanly. But we want to do it. So it's a productive output as an organization, as an entity. So it is not to replace anybody. We couldn't have put human beings to do 700 million images on a daily basis. But I think if you go by the weapon systems analogy, it had a different purpose altogether. I don't think weapon systems were ever looking at solving social problems. Well, they didn't, right? They caused more social problems than solving it. I think AI will follow a different path because it is intrinsically linked to solving for society. That is what we know of as of today. You're right. AI application in the weapon space, it's a different ballgame altogether.
No, but the point was that technology, once it is there, will get used. I think that was also something that was said by
somebody. And that may be a right time to talk about regulation at that point in time.
So actually, I feel that that's where, some of these practices become important. So in some of our companies, we are saying that the system can actually autonomously work pretty well. But you still have a human supervisory effort where the outcome can be critical.
You want to say something?
Well, the point I was going to make was, for a long time, we are going to have a human in the loop, if for nothing else, for liability purposes.
So just want to add to your question. So I think the points which most of the panelists made is that humans are, or they will be for a while, in the loop. And I know for a fact that some of the clients we work with where we make these predictive systems which do something doesn't have human in the loop. An example of that is there is a certain organization which wants to throw tear gas at some individuals which they think are causing nuisance, and they don't have humans in the loop. So I think those are the kind of places which worry me a bit, and regulation is definitely needed for those kind of situations. But it's difficult because most of the time these kind of applications are being used by governments, and it's very difficult to regulate. I don't know what the good answer is, but I know for a fact that humans aren't always in the loop.
You want to add something? Or any other questions? Because we have a few more. Yes, sir, you're there. Take the question here and then I'll take closing comments.
Just building on to his question, how can you factor in ethical decision making in artificial intelligence?
How do you factor in ethical concerns or decision making into artificial intelligence? I think all of you should answer that.
Yeah.
Will you answer it?
Sure. Happy to.
So the way to think about ethics, there can be two ways that you factor in ethics in artificial intelligence. One is you make sure models somehow are ethical, so the decisions that they're making are not way off and not subject to unethical views. The other that I think talked about is also tooling and making sure the data that these models learn on are free and represent ethical decisions. I think there are two ways. One is to make sure the models, and the way to make sure the models don't behave unethically is to make sure that, if they're doing a prediction, they're not predicting something that's way off.
Shivnath, we only have a minute, so everybody has to.
Sure. I mean, on just the question of ethics, I think if you dig into the research where all this collaborative responsible behavior is happening, each of the companies have its code of ethics. And there are fundamental principles like transparency, fundamental principles like maintaining data privacy of users, not to use it for anything beyond their terms and conditions. So I think all companies have it already. They are working on it, but it can get better. And that's why responsible behavior and partnership on AI is a good effort to achieve more of that.
It's a tough question actually and tough problem to solve. But there is no technology answer to it. I think it's the practitioner's answer. So you have agreed to what you said. I think you need to have a code of ethics, follow it, just like you have other code of ethics for other technologies today that you're developing.
So Media Lab, MIT Media Lab ran this model machine experiment where they asked people about, okay, you're in this car and there is a pedestrian on the road. Do you kill them or do you kill the passenger? What do you do and how do you save yourself? And the differences, the answers were significantly different over geographic and cultural divides, right? So what is ethical? Right? So behaving like a Chinese is ethical or behaving like an Indian is ethical? It's a very hard question to answer.
Okay, our time is up. It was a great discussion. I would only sort of, one of my favorite historians at Harvard is a guy called Richard Amarjot. He always warns against a disease called presentism, where you believe that your current circumstances and current challenges are so unique and have never been faced by anybody before. So I hope you keep presentism in mind as we think about artificial intelligence. But thank you all for coming, and thank you to my panelists.
Okay, we're almost done with the day, but not quite. We've got 30 minutes left, and I highly encourage you to stay on for this. We've talked a lot about data. The last panel touched about ethics. The next 30 minutes, we've got two fantastic speakers, conversationalists, who's going to talk a little bit about data privacy. They're going to provide a curtain raiser, if you like, to a whole range of issues that were discussed earlier today. Could I please call on stage Rob Sherwin, who's the Deputy Chief Privacy Officer at Facebook, who you know, and CV Madhukar, who's the founding director of the Parliamentary Research Service in New Delhi and currently an investment partner at Omidyar Network.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Lovely. I know this is the last session and it's been a long day, but we have Rob Sherman here, who's in a bit of a hot seat, really, both sort of physically here, but also in his role as the deputy head of privacy for Facebook. So this is a really good opportunity for us to understand how Facebook is thinking about privacy and how the Indian law might affect big tech companies such as Facebook. So Rob, thank you for the session. I will start with a question that's been on lots of people's minds for the last 18 months. A lot has happened on the question of privacy in the last 18 months. Within Facebook, as you see things evolving, what has really changed in 18 months on the question of privacy?
It's an important question, and I said on our panel earlier today that people are more interested and more focused on privacy than I've seen them in my career. And I think that's true both for governments and policymakers, but also for normal people who are using Facebook. And I think that's really positive. I think it's it's positive because it enables people to engage with understanding how their information is used and making the choices that are right for them. And I think increasingly, and we just had a panel about AI, as technology is becoming more sophisticated and people are getting more choices, their decisions about what they want done with their data, who they want it shared with, et cetera, are becoming more nuanced. And so our challenge at Facebook is to meet people where they are in all of those various places and communicate with them more proactively, give them the choices, but also do our part to make sure that we're behaving in as accountable a way as possible and protecting people's data as much as possible.
So give us 3 or 4 examples. Look, this is what it used to be, this is what it is today, right?
Sure.
Specific examples that show that Facebook has really embraced this challenge and is doing something about it.
Sure, so a couple of examples. Earlier this year, we engaged with everybody on Facebook and gave them information about how we're using their data for things like facial recognition or advertising, and asked them to make a choice about how they wanted it done. So rather than asking them to read the privacy policy, which is the way that it's sort of traditionally been done, we actually presented people with the opportunity to look at that. We did a similar thing another time looking at the apps that people are using, asking them to review the apps that they've approved and decide what they want done. So both on how information is going to other developers and how information is happening on Facebook, we've tried to give people those choices. Another example of this is really redesigning the privacy center on Facebook. So we had settings that, and I think there were 40 different places you could go to manage different parts of Facebook and manage your privacy. So we centralized that in a place called Privacy Shortcuts. And this is a place that's made for people to use. If they want to manage their privacy, it's easy to find the things that are most important. And then I'd also talk about some back-end things that are not necessarily as prominent in using the service, but I think are equally important. One of those is organizational changes that we've made. So we've had a privacy program at Facebook for many years that looks at, as a part of the product development process, how we think about privacy and making decisions about protecting people's information, being transparent with them, et cetera. But what we've done is we've moved all of this into a centralized organization at Facebook that's dedicated to both the infrastructure piece of protecting people's information and communicating with people and building products around privacy. And so the hope there is that we're going to continue the effort to engage with people proactively as a part of using Facebook and also protect their data on the back end.
One of the framings that is often thrown at us is not necessarily by Facebook, but in general, I think when there's a conversation about privacy, the question is, if you want to allow innovation, don't let privacy come in the way. How has all of this focus on privacy either helped or hurt innovation within Facebook?
So I think I hear people say this idea of, have to make a choice between privacy and innovation, and it's an interesting discussion to have, but I think it's also a false dichotomy. The reality is it's very easy to say we're going to not innovate because we have to protect data at all costs, or we have to innovate and therefore privacy goes out the window. But the reality is you can have both if you do it thoughtfully. And so that requires us to slow down and be more deliberate in the decisions that we've made, that we're making, and that's certainly something that we've done at Facebook. And think not just about the individual products that we're making, but about the sort of longer term impact of what we're building, how we're using data, and how people will want us to use data, and use that as a lens through which to build out our products and services. And I think we've been having discussions about the Sri Krishna bill today, and I think that same lens applies when I think about that, because you can make a decision to have very restrictive requirements for use of data and say we're not interested in innovating, or vice versa. But actually, I think one of the things that is interesting and valuable about the approach is to say we think that we can have both. We think that people can have very robust rights to control their data, and the ability to get value out of their data, and we can grow the Indian tech economy as well at the same time. That requires some very deliberate policy choices, but I think it's very possible to do.
One of the more contentious pieces of discussion around privacy is the idea of consent. And like most tech companies, I signed my consent form on Facebook some years ago when I joined. So what's the evolution really in terms of how this idea of consent should be viewed, especially in light of the things we've seen for the last 18 months, but also how do you see this evolving? Because Facebook could be doing many things over the years, and just because I gave consent 6 years ago whenever I joined Facebook, how do companies grapple with this idea? Is consent permanent?
It's an important question, and I think the philosophy around consent in the privacy community more broadly, and certainly in companies like Facebook, has evolved a lot over the years. It used to be that companies thought you'd have a very long privacy policy, ask people to click a button, and you're done. And I think it's very clear if we were to look around the room, most people are not engaging with privacy in that way. And I think it's fair to say that if you think about your job, if somebody in my role who's responsible for protecting privacy, if I think about my job as writing a privacy policy, getting people to click a button, and I'm done, I'm doing it wrong. And so a lot of the discussion of consent has evolved to recognizing that there are different kinds of consent, there are different approaches to engaging with people. One of the distinctions that I think has also evolved is the amount of information that you present to people. Again, if I give you a very long boilerplate document, you might click to consent because you want to get to whatever it was that you were trying to do, but that doesn't mean that you've engaged with it and that you've understood it. It also is the case that different people like to consume this information in different ways. So how we've tried to evolve this over the course of building Facebook is consents are simpler, right? So we show people less information, much more focused on this app wants to get this information, is that okay with you, yes or no? People might consent less frequently to that, but they're making an informed decision, which is important. We've also tried to build this kind of education into the process of using Facebook. So rather than have pop-ups all the time that are interrupting you and asking you to do things, as a part of deciding who you're going to share with on Facebook, for example, that's integrated into the process. We'll show you education as you're using our service so that you'll understand how information is being used. And I think those are the kinds of things, showing people contextual information is really important. So how I think this translates to data protection law is, the Sri Krishna, the paper, talks about a sort of range of consents, right? There are some things that are particularly sensitive or put people at risk of harm where we need to be especially prominent in talking with them. There are some things that are just typical. They're called in the legislation, they're called reasonable uses. Think about an app that uses data to protect information security or to make sure that the app doesn't crash, so it checks the amount of memory free on a device or something like that. These are the kinds of things that are just typical and expected, and you wouldn't need separate consent to do that. And then in the middle, there's other kinds of consent, maybe implied, maybe explicit, and so there's the spectrum. And I think that's a useful thing. The law doesn't get into a lot of detail about that yet, so I think there's discussion still to be had. But I think one of the things that I think is a contribution in the way that the law thinks about consent is it's not one unitary thing.
One of the things about consent is that often individual data is shared with third parties, often anonymized, but it is shared. Yes, people have consented to sharing data because it was in the consent form. If the third party that receives this data does something bad with it, and it can hurt people, where does the liability fall? Because the individual thinks he's really dealing with company X or company Y, but the data has gone on to many others. And so how does Facebook think about this challenge?
So I mean, I think the liability question is one that's very specific to law, and I think in the context of the Sri Krishna bill, I think that's a discussion that's still to be had in a lot of ways. I do think that people expect for Facebook to take responsibility and to make sure that the ecosystem that we offer is protected. And certainly it's the case that third parties might misuse our service. I mean, we've seen that over the past year. But one of the things that we have done is invested very heavily into making a number of changes to our platform to make sure that we're governing it as effectively as possible. One of these is restricting the amount of data that can go out to apps in the first place, except in limited cases where they request access and we do a more intensive review. We're looking back at apps that have had access to data in the past and making sure that they're complying. And we're also expiring people's access. Even when people consent to have a particular app get access to their data, we're expiring that after 3 months. And so the idea is your point from before, if you consented 6 years ago, you might not remember that. And so if you said, I want this app to get access to my data 6 years ago, after 3 months, if you haven't used that app, we should shut it off so it's not continuing to access your data. So these are some of the steps. I think the reality is, it will always be an ongoing process because there will always be people who are trying to misuse the system, and I think we have to continue to stay on top of that as best we can.
I have a number of questions, but I'd very much like for the audience to ask questions for a few minutes, and then I'd come back with a wrap-up question or two. If you could please pass on the mic. There's someone at the back there, please. Thank you.
Rob, I wanted to ask about data portability. So currently, Facebook's compliance with the GDPR requirement is that when I export data out of Facebook, I get all the data that I have explicitly submitted to Facebook as a platform, and I also get a subset of the data that Facebook has observed from my device. But what I don't get is the inferred data, the inferences that Facebook has made using data, the collected data and the submitted data and the collected data. So when will Facebook implement a data export that will allow us to also get the inferred data set? Thank you.
Yeah, so just for context for the audience, one of the things that Facebook has done for many years as a part of our effort to give people the ability to access and port their data is give them the ability to download the information that's in their account, so things that they've shared. So for example, you uploaded a bunch of photos to Facebook of your family. You might want to go to another photo sharing service and download and upload that information. Again, we hope that people will find Facebook valuable and want to continue using it, but we also want people to be able to take that information with them. And one of the things that we've done recently is we've partnered with Google and Twitter and some other companies on something called the Data Transfer Project to make that process easier so you can take information and send it directly. Now, the download that you get from Facebook includes the kind of information that you're likely to want to upload to other services, and that you're going to want to gain, for example, your photos that you might want to move or your posts. when it comes to things like the interest that we infer about the ads that you see, that's also available through our tool called Ad Preferences. So anybody can go in their ad settings and see what are the interests that we've inferred that you might have based on the way that you use Facebook. You can choose to opt out of those. You can export you can get a copy of the information that's in your interests, and you can also choose to turn them off if you want to do that.
Yeah, there is one, but this question on inferred data, do you want to address that as well?
Yeah, so that's what I was referring to with the ad preferences. So I think the gentleman was talking about when we might make a decision that, if you like the pages of a bunch of car manufacturers, we might infer that you're interested in cars. And so you can see a list of all of those inferences that we use for ad targeting, and you can either remove them if you want to do that, or you can understand how specific ads are being used, how those interests are being used to deliver specific ads.
I want both the panelists to answer to this. Now we are talking about consent and also about terms and conditions. If you go through the terms and conditions, if you just open the terms and conditions, they are so elaborate and they run to several pages. Probably one would get with an impression that he would be spending his entire life reading the terms and conditions only. Because most of the people don't have the expertise to understand the terms and conditions. Neither they do have the time to understand the terms and conditions. Is there any enactment or law which prescribes the companies saying that the terms and conditions should be only about half page or something like that, which is in simple language, understandable by all the common people? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So it's a really interesting question about how the terms and conditions or the data policy of a service work and how lengthy or short they should be. And I think there are two perspectives that we hear on this. One is that people want our data policy to be expansive and include a lot of information, because if you're a regulator, for example, and you go and look at our data policy, or if you're a privacy expert, you want to be able to see the information about how your information is being used in one place. And I think it's equally true that consumers may not want to go through that full document and see all of that information. So how have we approached this? Well, in two ways. The first is we updated our data policy a little over a year ago at this point to make it easier to read, so that it's written in question and answer format with basic kinds of questions like, what information does Facebook collect, or who's my information shared with, so that people can understand that in a straightforward way if they want to go and use that document. But we also believe people shouldn't have to look at that document in order to understand information about how their data is being used. And so we've tried to build in a number of ways, we have a new center called Privacy Basics that we've just updated that includes information in a walkthrough format. So it's a lot easier to access, and you can say, okay, I want to, somebody's bothering me on Facebook, how do I block them? Or how do I control the ads that I see to deal with the last question that the gentleman asked? And those are things that you can get a walkthrough that explains in very easy to understand language how you can manage that aspect of your privacy. We've done a number of things like this, including things as a part of using Facebook, where we prompt people to look at this information, because we realize some people are going to want to look at the data policy. It should be accessible for those people, but many people are not going to want to, and we need to make sure that we're meeting their needs as well.
The gentleman at the back, please.
Good evening. I'm Venkatesh. I am the co-founder of Fee Plaza, a payment startup. This is more a generic kind of question. In my company, we don't take any data that is not required by our business because I know any additional data can be a liability. We don't even take credit card data, though we are a payment company. We don't take debit card data. Right? We are vulnerable. It makes us vulnerable to vulnerable. End of the day, it's a liability that we don't want to carry. At any point, has Facebook thought it is carrying more data than necessary? Question part A. Part B, the data you have gathered, do you think at some point of time will it be ever useful to at all, or are you accumulating junk?
Sorry, could you repeat the last part of the question?
Have you ever thought that the data you are accumulating may be junk at all, after some time? Because people upload all sorts of crap on Facebook. sorry to use that language, but people, it's almost like a trash can. So do you think you will really use it at some point of time?
So I think, believe it or not, we think a lot about what information we collect and how long we keep it. We have a privacy process at Facebook where whenever we're building a new feature that involves collection of data, we think about what information are we collecting, how is it serving the people that we're trying to serve, and how long do we need to keep it for? And so our database systems are set up so that, for example, if we only need to keep information for 30 days, we can set that up at the outset when we build the feature, and then the information is automatically deleted or de-identified after 30 days. And so that's a big part of how we've built our service. With regard to information that people put on their profiles, that's not information that's particularly valuable to Facebook from a business perspective, but very often it is valuable to people to be able to keep access to the information that they've shared over time, and so we want to enable people to do that.
One last question here.
Hi, I actually had a couple of follow-ups on the previous question. So the first question was about inferred data. And I think your answer spoke mostly in an allocative sense, in the sense of advertisements and what we see, and that we can change the ads that we see. But if we turn to another part of Facebook's business, I'm wondering how you think about the same data that is collected and the inferred data that informs our newsfeed. Because I think that's like the main reckoning that Facebook has had in the last year, especially in terms of elections and things like that. The fact that that much data is inferred about things that we don't know we're consenting to, so how long I spend on a post, whether I liked a post before I open the link or after, those kind of insights tell us things that we didn't consent to. So it's not a tick in the box, right? It's more like something that came across, that was revealed down the line, and you then use that for the newsfeed. And that has a more like freedom of expression, freedom of opinion sort of lens, and I'm wondering how you think about the same question about, how do users have more agency over what is gleaned about them, not in an allocative sense, but in a freedom of expression sense. And I think related, if you will let me, just related, talking about data minimization, again, it's a follow-up from the previous question. A lot of what we hear about, machine learning models that feed the newsfeed is that, they're not easily interpretable. And the fact that, the volume of data that is collected is what leads to it being non-interpretable. I'm wondering if you're thinking of data minimization as a way that can also introduce explainability by design. So the less data you have, the less complicated your model has to be. And so there's more insights of just these two questions. Thank you.
Sure. So I'll take your newsfeed question first, and then I'll take data minimization. On newsfeed, by far the most important signal for what shows up in your newsfeed is what people choose. Is what people choose to follow. So the people that you're friends with, the pages that you follow, that drives what shows up in your newsfeed more than anything else. Equally, the things that you like and the people you communicate with most frequently are most likely to show up in your newsfeed. So for example, if I very frequently like my wife's posts when she posts on Facebook, she's going to show up more frequently in my newsfeed. And so in that way, people are very much in control of both what shows up and how frequently it shows up. That said, we also recognize, as you point out in your question, that it's important to be as transparent as we can about the factors that go into that. And so what we've started doing is we've published a newsfeed FYI blog that goes into a lot more detail about the specific factors that go into how we rank in newsfeed. And as we develop it and we make improvements, for example, we made an improvement earlier to reduce spam and increase the frequency with which people hear from their friends and family, people they're connected with on Facebook. And so that's something that we talk about in the Newsfeed FYI blog, because we want to make sure that we're being transparent as we make those choices. Coming to your data minimization question, I think particularly the last panel was about AI, and there is AI that drives Newsfeed. And I think one of the challenges that we think about is making sure that we are serving, in building those models, serving a diverse set of needs for people across the spectrum who use Facebook. And a part of doing that is having a broad training set so that the model isn't biased, and the model, as best as we can, is making sure to meet the needs of all of the different parts of our constituency. And so I think being tailored about what's included in the model is important, but so is making sure that we're broadly representative and making sure that we're meeting the needs of all the different kinds of people who use Facebook. So we think about that as well.
Yeah, brief question. We'll make this the last question and then we'll wrap it up.
I don't use Facebook or any other form of social media, never have. But I recently heard from a friend that my name and my email address has popped up in a certain Facebook group. I'm not quite sure how that's happened. Is there any system that you have to make sure that people like me are left out of your loop completely?
Well, it's certainly, without knowing the specifics of the situation, it's hard to respond. I think certainly people like on any email service or any message board, people can post different things, and so there's no way to assure that somebody won't post your name in a post that they make, for example. That said, if you're not on Facebook but you become aware that information about you is on Facebook that violates our rules, for example, if it invades your privacy, then there is a form that you can fill out if you go to the Facebook Help Center that says you're able to say, I'm not on Facebook, but there's information that I want to object to, and that will go to somebody and they'll take a look at the content. So even if you're not on Facebook, you do have the ability to report something and have it taken down.
Yeah, I think this is one of those topics that's both current and sort of never. I think any of us is ever in a situation where we're saying, now I get it, now I feel safe, right? It's not about a company or another company. It is just the nature of what the environment is like today around data. I have a long list, but obviously we've run out of time. I want to ask one last question, Rob, before we end. Do you imagine Facebook and maybe others putting out a data ethics charter in public anytime soon and ask people to hold you to account to the data ethics charter?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We've been thinking a lot about it. We actually recently published earlier this year a set of principles around privacy. So if you click on privacy on our page, you can see the principles, and they talk a lot about how we think about privacy as a part of building Facebook and what we hope to be held accountable for. But I think a part of that is sort of what we talk about externally, but I think it's equally important what we talk about internally and how we make decisions. And so I think one big part of doing a better job of doing privacy is being less private with how Facebook makes decisions. And so when it comes to ethics in the context of research, for example, we published a paper talking about our internal process for making decisions. So thinking about the implications for, when we do research, is this research serving people? Is there a potential for unintended consequences and how we mitigate them? Are we protecting privacy? And is this kind of work expected by people? And then, and judging that against not just the way that we think about using data internally, but the principles that we've articulated externally is really important. I think one of the things that comes up in the discussion of privacy legislation, though, is sort of beyond sort of the way that Facebook thinks about legislation, or thinks about privacy and what we think about as our ethical standards, is sort of a broader societal discussion of for India or for the world, what do we think are the right lines to draw? And I think increasingly we're going to be having those conversations not just as Facebook, but as a society. And I think those are really the most important conversations to be having, particularly as we're thinking about building new technologies, because I think the goal is to build technologies that really enrich people. Like in the world of AI, using it to enable, enable growth and connectivity around the world, to enable disaster response, to enable blind people to get access to information that's in their feed that they might not be able to see. I mean, these are all the promise of technology, but we have to do it ethically and we have to think about the broader implications of it. We've built processes internally to make sure that we're thinking about that, but I think the real thing that we need to do, and part of why conversations like this are really important, is not just making those decisions on our own, but talking to experts and having a broader discussion. So that's, I think, where I hope things go from here.
Thank you. I just do want to call out, for instance, both business choices that the gentleman behind there said, look, I don't want to collect data that I will not use. Yes, there's a liability question, and also at some level there's an ethics question involved in what you actually collect. And so this conversation is just beginning in some ways, and I hope that all of us in this community will nudge this forward in the direction it ought to move. I do think that big tech especially has an outsized role in shaping this conversation to move to a place where this is where big tech is more trusted than it is today. On that note, thank you very much, Rob, for sharing.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we wrap our discussions for today. Thank you for engaging with the speakers and the issues the panels highlighted this morning. Just a quick housekeeping note. Please do carry your badges to facilitate your entry to the session tomorrow, as well as the QR codes you used this morning for registration. We begin tomorrow morning at 10:30 a.m. with Nibruti Rai and Mohandas Pai. Registrations begin at 9:30 a.m. Venue remains the same. Finally, please do join us for dinner at the Dia Terrace located on this floor at 7:30 p.m. We look forward to seeing you at dinner and at the sessions tomorrow morning. Thank you once again.